It was fun to go back in time with Ben Martin. He has been a coach at several different places. Now he is the principal at Dr. He's a principal at Doctor. He's principal at Jefferson Forest. He's the good doctor. He's Ben Martin right here on the Sports Buffet podcast. Finally, the good doctor has come to the Sports Buffet. Not that we had to negotiate with his agents or representatives or anything. Ben Martin talking to me. You're now the fourth principal I've interviewed. So I must ask, when you did your dissertation, if it was on student teacher retention or how to keep long-term teachers, I have to leave. So what was the dissertation on?
My dissertation was actually on truancy, on student truancy and mental health.
Obviously, you and Joey Crawford were not trapped in the same room coming up with the same thing, because I talked to Dr. Crawford, Dr. Shields, and Dr. Sawyer, and Dr. Crawford and Dr. Shields had the same thing. So I'm like, when I talked to Dr. Sawyer, I'm like, if you've got the same things they do, I got to go.
Well, and I think we all did different programs.
Okay. Yeah, because I think Dr. Sawyer told me he went to Tech, because I want to say it was went to Roanoke. It was during the COVID times.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought you and Crawford were kind of in the same thing.
Dr. Crawford did the University of Lynchburg.
Okay.
And I did Liberty University.
Okay. So we're good. At least we had no copycats around here. I normally ask everybody the same question, but I'm going to give you a different one to start with. Who is your major influence in wanting to be a coach?
Probably my biggest influence in coaching would have been Scott Abel and my time in Amherst. So my first job was at Alta Vista back in 2000. And I coached for 4 years there and then left and coached with Scott before the state championship. So we started 2 years in 2004, 2005, where we were still a pretty good football team, but then won state championships 2 years after that. But just kind of being around Scott for 4 years and learning his leadership, learning what he did as an offensive coordinator. Obviously, that influenced me as far as I'm a triple option guy, the same as what we were when we were in Amherst when I coached. But just even from how he interacted with players to how he interacted with the public, those are things I constantly learned from him at a young age.
Did you know or see that he'd be going maybe to the highest level?
No, I didn't. I think when we first started there, I thought we were kind of starting a dynasty in Amherst, and that would be a thing that we would do for years. But I think we all understood when he decided to go to the collegiate level.
Because I don't think there's anything wrong with just, quote unquote, just being a high school coach. Nothing wrong with that at all. But you've seen some high school coaches go up to the college level, and I always wonder, did people see that, or did people think that, or, was so-and-so going to be a high school coach forever, if that makes sense?
I think if you'd asked Scott, he would have said he would have been a high school coach forever.
Right.
But I think we all looked and saw that there was potential there, that he could do much more, and that there would be a lot of people calling him and wanting him to take over, whatever level that may be.
Do you think you were a good player when you played?
That I was a good player? When I was a player, when I was in high school, football wasn't my number one sport. I always grew up thinking I was going to be a basketball player. And so I put a lot of my focus into basketball. But I can distinctly remember my junior year, I went to a 5-star camp in Charlotte, North Carolina, and around actual basketball players, around D1 basketball players, guys that were 7 foot tall, and learned very quickly, I'm not a basketball player.
Was there anybody specifically that you remember that pointed that out? I don't want to say that pointed that out, but a 7-footer that you're like, man, this guy is super good. Was there a name?
Well, so I remember during that time you had, if you remember these names, what was it, Serge Zwicker that played for North Carolina. He was at that camp.
Okay.
I also know I sat in a conference where a guy was talking about the NCAA, and he pointed out Mike Bibby was in the audience. So there were guys that were quality players that I realized not that Division III is a bad thing, but I would be a Division III basketball player at best. Where football-wise, I felt like I could go to a different level. And for me, financially, I couldn't afford to go to college. So I needed to find a way to get a scholarship to pay for education. So it all worked out for me.
And I would say if you get a scholarship, I don't want to say does that make you a good football player, but did you feel like that was the qualification to make you a good football player?
I think I was good enough to play at the college level.
Okay.
And I had aspirations to do more than that. But there are certain intangibles that you have when you get to that elite level, and I didn't have those.
Heritage or LCA? I forget.
Both.
Okay.
So, yeah, I actually grew up in Lynchburg City.
Okay.
Went to Heritage Elementary, Sandusky Middle, went to Heritage High School all the way up to my junior year. And then my senior year, I graduated from LCA.
Freshman, sophomore, junior year, who were some of the basketball players that you played against? Do you remember?
I don't know about playing against, but I remember during that time, it was the Western District, and you had before me, and I remember watching people like George Lynch that was playing at PH.
Right.
Fleming had some D1 guys
Right.
that came through during that time. GW had state championship D1 guys that played at, and I don't remember a lot of
Well, you
names.
didn't have a ton here, is my point, in Lynchburg.
No.
Lynchburg was not the, I don't want to say hotbed, but they didn't have a lot of guys that they were just spouting out to go D1, D1, D1. And furthermore, you're, I think, a couple years older than me. Seminole District wasn't a thing for Heritage back then. I want to say that came my senior year, maybe around 96, 97.
Yeah, correct. When I was in Lynchburg City, it was the Western District.
Right.
So Heritage was in the Western District playing against Flash, GW, Fleming, PH, Franklin County, Halifax.
Was Albemarle in there?
Albemarle was in there as well.
So your close game is the rival game, which is class.
Yes.
After that, gosh, I've never really timed it out to see if Danville or Charlottesville or Halifax is closer. But there's nothing really like within a stone's throw.
No.
Like there is now.
Yeah, correct.
And also, when you played, if I'm not mistaken, travel wasn't the mega thing it is now. Did you play travel sports?
No, there was. If you played an AAU team in basketball, you were the elite during that time.
But you went to a camp, so were you the elite?
No, I wouldn't say it was an invitation camp.
I got
but it was also one of those things that you paid for and to kind of see where you were. So there was all levels from D3 to D1.
All right, so now we're getting into football, and when you're at LCA, I'm assuming nothing that you play is probably close either. Everything is probably distanced out a lot.
Correct. Well, yeah, when I was at LCA and they were private league, the only local teams that we would have played during that time, we played William Byrd and Tunstall that year.
Okay.
So we did play two public schools, but everything else was private that was much further away. You get into like Atlantic Shores,
wow,
which is a haul.
You're going down to the beach at that point. So you become you've been a head coach, you've been an athletic director, you've been an assistant principal, you've been a principal, you're a husband and a father too. Where did you have your first conflict that you feel like helped in other areas of conflict? Does that make sense?
Conflict
that you had to deal with, and it made conflict in the other jobs a little bit easier. I mean, conflict, I'm assuming, in marriages is common, no doubt. Now, it's not like you and your wife are having like knockdown dragouts where somebody's going to sleep in a hotel or anything. But I mean, is there a conflict meter, you think, to where one conflict is higher than others and stuff like that?
I think dealing with conflict, as far as the conflict that helped me in all of those roles, probably would have started as a head football coach.
Okay.
Because kind of as an assistant and even as a teacher, you deal with conflict, but you don't deal with it nearly as much as when you're the head coach. When you're the one that is in charge and responsible for whatever issues that it may be, that's when conflict starts. So building those kind of skills and dealing with conflict would have started as a head coach, which has helped me as an athletic director and has helped me as a principal.
Did you head coach B-team JV areas?
So football-wise, I was the head JV coach at Amherst.
Did you have more conflict in a younger athletic spot than you would an older one, like a JV versus a varsity? Does that make sense?
I think there's a lot more conversations about playing time probably as a JV coach than there was at the varsity level. Because most of the times when guys got to that varsity level, they knew their role, they knew their amount of playing time.
Well, I don't want to say your parents didn't love you, but like once we get later on, parents get more involved, shall we say. So by the time you're starting to coach, the involvement is getting a little bit higher than it would have when young Ben played. So that's why I asked about, did the conflict increase throughout? Because you're starting off at JV to where I think people really get passionate about, is my child playing? Is my child, this or that? Then you become an athletic director later in life to where now you're not in charge of one sport. You're in charge of all of them. And people can get a little crazy at a high school game. Now you're a principal of how many students? I mean, everybody loves their kid.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely conflict has increased,
Right.
As the levels move up. But at the same time, I'm dealing with more and more people
Sure.
as I move up.
Friday nights, you're just going to get called an idiot because you didn't run or pass type of thing. You really don't get that conflict on game night during the game. So I feel like, is that the most relaxing time when you could just, either call a player or be on the sideline because nobody can really get to you?
I don't know about relaxing. I think if you put a heart monitor on me, I don't think it would say that I was relaxed, but focus on conflict and what's going on in the stands or with issues that you might have with parents. That's not in your mind as you're coaching.
Did you like a blowout or a close game better?
I like a close game better. It's nice to have a blowout every once in a while, just so your guys get a little bit of rest.
Right.
Avoid injury.
Sure.
Get some other guys in, get them some playing time.
What's one of the biggest games that sticks out to you? Because you coached at Appomattox, coached at EC Glass, you spent time at Alta Vista and Amherst as an assistant. Is there one or two games that really kind of stick in your memory even today?
I think the things that stick in my mind are kind of the atmospheres, and probably the ones that I remember the most as an assistant. Probably the biggest games that I remember are the games in Amherst playing against Salem. And there were two of them. There was the first, actually, I guess there's three of them. My second year there was the infamous Salem out of bounds play, which then led to the following year where we played at Salem. And I remember about that game. It was a great game back and forth, but I also remember we pulled up in the bus between 5 and 5:30, and there were fans wrapped around the stadium ready to get in. And I never heard a total, but I think the total of fans at that stadium at that time was somewhere around 18,000. And so that was a packed high school atmosphere. And it was a close game. It was a constant back and forth until the very end of the game where we won. And obviously winning after that controversial call was a big deal. But then I also remember we played Salem the following year on a Saturday in Amherst. And as an offensive line coach, we always would walk through the stands in our pregame. And typically when you walk through the stands in your pregame, there's not a lot of people there. Right. But playing against Salem, all of the Amherst fans were there at that time. And so when we came down, walked down, all the fans stood up, cheered. And those are just kind of good feelings and atmospheres that I remember. Now, getting into details of games, those were both really good games as well.
I remember when I was doing my radio show in Alta Vista, I was broadcasting for William Campbell, so I didn't see stuff that happened before. And, when you see it later, the kid was way out of bounds. Mm-hmm. I'll say it in my words. And I talked to Scott that evening, and Coach Abel, I would never have known anything happened because very even keel. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure he was upset when the call happened, but to me, he's a guy that, I don't know what the word is, wouldn't get too high on something bad, wouldn't get too low after the fact. Now, granted, he had probably a lot of time to cool down, but still wasn't, so outrageous to where he was throwing stuff or I didn't feel like he was going to hang up on me. Testament to him. And I assume that did you learn demeanor from him?
Definitely. But at the same time, as a coach, you have to be your own personality. Sure. I mean, Scott is a very outgoing personality.
Right.
That is not necessarily me. I'm pretty introverted at times.
I can see how Scott can recruit. For sure. By the way, because I would want to go play for that guy after meeting him. I can't say that about everybody in the high school circles around here.
Well, and Scott was a guy that was always good at very different aspects of being a head coach. Anywhere, again, from he was great at being able to pull the community in. He was great at X's and O's. He was great at developing relationships with players and having high expectations for those players, but at the same time, loving on them when he needed to love on them, kind of a thing. So those are all different aspects that made him a great coach that was easy as an assistant to learn those different aspects from. Now, our personalities are completely different.
Here's my super tough question. Scott Abel, the most relational coach you've seen?
Most relational coach that I've worked for.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Because most people answer that question. The Jeff Woody. I call that the Jeff Woody question. Because people say he's very relational. And I think of relational sometimes that you could drop somebody on Mars
and they're going to be friends with the little green spacemen, and by the end of the day, type of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, he's definitely. I think if you asked any player that played for Scott, he knew he spent time with every single one of them and would do anything for any of them. And I think our entire staff was that way, and that's what made us a good football program.
Jug Bowl. How was it the first time you played in it?
Well,
I guess you knew the history a little bit from being in Lynchburg, has grown up in Lynchburg too.
Yes.
Okay.
So as a kid, it was one of those things that I still recall, City Stadium being packed. You couldn't find a parking spot, walking from Ford Avenue, trying to get to the gate and get in the game. So I went to the game multiple times as a student, a middle school student, even ninth grade student, to watch the game, because it was just one of those things growing up that everybody in the city of Lynchburg went to when Glass and Heritage played. As a player, I remember being moved up my sophomore year. That was probably my first Jug Bowl experience in playing Glass, and it was really cold. And I remember I couldn't feel my feet by the end because I stood a lot on the sidelines. But as a player playing in it, my junior year, we actually played Glass twice that year, once in the regular season and once in the playoffs. And that's tended to be the pattern there for several years while I was at Heritage. And so it was always a big atmosphere. There were always controversial calls. It was always kind of a back and forth. But it's the one game you look forward to. If you were a student in Lynchburg City or you grew up in Lynchburg, it's the one game you look forward to every year. And the one game guys still talk about.
How different was it the first year you're coaching in the Jug Bowl? Was the week of practice different than normal weeks, or was it pretty much the same?
No, it's different. My first year at Glass and coaching in the Jug Bowl, it was definitely one of those weeks that I didn't have to do an awful lot every day to get the kids excited to practice. They looked forward to that game. And again, as a coach, the first time we played Heritage twice. And the first time was not a very good outcome. The second time was a very close game and back and forth. The difference probably between 1990s Jug Bowl and now is the crowd. I mean, you don't have the same atmosphere.
Do you ever feel like you had to de-escalate your kids a little bit? Because, were they too pumped up?
Probably on Monday and Tuesday, when they're coming in Monday and very excited, jumping around. But at the same time, when the closer you get to that game and game time, you want them to have that energy.
And you don't have huddle then to where you are studying film, right?
We did have huddle,
okay.
But we didn't have the accessibility of as many games to watch.
So, because I remember the old days, you're meeting at the in between spot. You bring your 2 videos, I'll bring my 2 videos.
Yeah. So at Glass, we had huddle. Okay. It started to become a thing during that time. But my time in Appomattox, it was DVDs. You'd meet people, exchange DVDs, 3 DVDs, and then go back and watch those.
Biggest Jug Bowl memory?
The biggest Jug Bowl memory would have been the second time my junior year when we played Glass. Paris Leonard was our quarterback. I know we had a play at the end of the game. There's a pretty obvious face mask that was not called. And so I cannot remember the score, but it would have determined the outcome of the game. And so it was a very disappointing way to end your season.
Who coached you at Heritage?
Fred Stansberry was the head coach. Yeah.
He's been on both sides of that Jug Bowl. How intense was Coach Stansberry that week?
So I think the coaching staff was very intense because a lot of the guys that were at Heritage during that time are legendary kind of coaches when you talk about Heritage coaches. But they also, many of them spent time at Glass.
Coach Green at your place too?
So Coach Green was an athletic trainer during that time.
Okay.
But Tony Francis would have been there. Okay. And then Coach Knight would have been there as well. Now, Doug Smith would have been a JV coach during that time.
So Coach Stansberry, what was his demeanor? Was he a fiery guy? Was he a non-fiery guy? What was his demeanor just in general?
He was a fiery guy. Coach Stansberry was always a fiery guy. It didn't matter what the game was. And I remember my very first interactions with him. I was a middle school student at Sandusky Middle, and I just loved playing for him. He definitely was an outgoing personality and very approachable as well.
Do you think fiery kind of goes with old school a little bit or not as much?
Somewhat. I feel like for us, it was always a thing where not that the head coach wasn't fiery, but I feel like if you had those personalities, your defensive coordinator definitely has to be a fiery personality.
Right. Because I can, from watching the highlights over the years, I can think of some people that you highlight wise you're going to see as non-fiery, but from stories you hear down the road, I'm blanking on somebody right now. I just can't think of anybody. I don't know that I would say Bo Henson was fiery from what I would see on TV, but I mean, if you listen to people, Bo could get a little spark set in him and get going.
Well, I think it's one of those things that you always see with just personalities in general. If you always are fired up, and if you're always on level 9 or 10,
right.
It's sometimes kids get used to that, and they don't know when to take you seriously. So I think it's kind of that fluctuation of back and forth of personalities, but kids just learning your personality and learning to know when they need to understand that it's time to be businesslike.
Did you ever have that fiery out-of-body experience moment that you can think of when you were coaching?
I can remember a lot of Saturday mornings waking up with a headache, and from where some of those games got pretty intense. And I think, like as a head coach, I had a lot of those in very close games, and a lot of those.
Are we talking everywhere, or is there a certain place more than others?
Definitely when we played Gretna when I was in Appomattox, those would have been some pretty intense games back and forth where there were some fiery moments. That was probably in the Dogwood District. That was probably the one game for Appomattox during my time where it got intense.
You just heard from the doctor, Ben Martin. He is the principal at Jefferson Forest High School. Cavaliers football season will kick off in just about a month, and we'll have more coverage throughout the year with JT Cruz and more. And you never know when Ben Martin could stop by for some good old hijinks and fun right here on the Sports Buffet Podcast with Bob Alvis.